Hi, welcome to the Air Manager API tutorial video series. In this video we're going to be looking at Canvas. So here we are on the API page again. Click down to Canvas. So in this video we're going to start looking at how to generate and start a canvas and how you can manipulate using these move, visible, opacity and viewport rect of a canvas. We're not going to go through all of those in detail because these are common and we've covered them in previous videos when we touched on the subject of nodes, but we're going to just maybe show the rotate and just show how you set up the initial canvas, and then we're going to probably pick some of these draw functions, not all of them in this video but just a few of the basic ones like maybe a line and rectangle, circle, etc. And we're going to start drawing to that canvas, and then maybe in a later video or two we'll start looking at some of the more advanced draw functions, and then maybe join some of these together to actually create some graphics that we may want to use in an instrument, just to give an idea of what's possible and how you go about achieving that. So we'll keep referring back to this API page, but for the minute we're going to open the code window. And so what I've got set up here is just a very basic example for how you would start with a canvas. And so it starts with the canvas add function. So just going back to the wiki very quickly there, if we click on this canvas add function, you can see that these are the arguments, very similar to what you've seen with lots of the other functions. You have an X and a Y of where you want to start the canvas, so your instrument may actually be bigger than the canvas, or the canvas could be the full size of the instrument. That's up to you to determine. But you give it an X and a Y, so obviously if you're going to make it a full instrument size instrument, that X and Y would just be 0, 0, so to start in the top left hand corner, and then the width and height would be the full width of the instrument and the full height of the instrument. But of course you can make them smaller than that, and you can move the X and Y to be some proportion of that larger instrument if you wish. So it's literally just the X, Y, the width and the height, and then just a draw callback. So to set up a canvas is as simple as that, and in the normal way of setting up an ID, like we've done with many of the other functions, you give it an ID at the beginning and we can refer back to that ID for later use when we want to refer back to this particular canvas. And you can set up a few of these different canvases if you want. It's important just to remember that as you add them, then the Z order, just as in with when you add images, whichever one you add first will be at the bottom, and whichever one you add last will be on top as it appears in the instrument. So if you want to layer your instrument up with different graphics, or you want a particular graphic to move over the top of another one, then that one needs to be after the one that you want it to move over the top of. So let's just go back to the API page and go back to our code window here. So here you see we've got the canvas add function. So I've set up a little test instrument here. So it's our same API tutorial instrument, but this time I've made the size of that instrument 640 by 360. Let's just double check that. Yeah, so 640 by 360 is the size of the instrument. Now, I've made it a little bit bigger because we're going to draw on the canvas, just so it makes it a little bit easier to see. So you can see here now I've set up my canvas to be exactly the same size as I was explaining before. So 640 by 360, and it's just going to start at 0, 0. So it's going to take up the whole full screen of the instrument. And then I've given it a name called draw callback. Now, draw callback, the function, you can see I've got a few things commented out here. Don't worry about those too much for a minute, and I'll explain what they're for as we go along. So the draw callback, very simply what we're going to do with this canvas at the moment is this is where you put your individual draws that are going to go on that canvas. So if we go back now to the draw functions are all here. Okay, so initially we set up the canvas add, then we can put all the draws. Now if we just want to draw some static thing and then leave it as that, and we never want to update it, it would be just a simple case of adding the canvas and doing the draws within the callback, and it would just draw that, and that would be it. We have another function here called canvas draw, where we can basically redraw the canvas. So if we wanted to draw something else, or we wanted to give a different XY coordinate for the next set of draws, then we would call this canvas draw as often as we wanted, and it would redraw the canvas each time. Now the important thing to note there is that when it does that redraw, it basically wipes the canvas clean and then starts redrawing again. So if you've got lots of items on that canvas that you had previously from this initial draw, then they will all get essentially overwritten as if it's a blank sheet of paper, and you start over. So if you want to add them all again, then you have to make sure that you add those functions again. The way round that is the things that are not changing you put on one layer, and the items that are changing you maybe put on a layer over the top, assuming you want it to appear over the top, but you could put it underneath, I suppose. And then you don't have to change that initial canvas, but you can obviously put all the moving or changing items on a second canvas, or third or fourth, however many you want. Okay, so so these are the individual draw functions. So what we're going to do when we look at our code is we're just going to see here, ignore these first two for the minute that are commented out, but we're just going to draw a rectangle. So you always start the draws with an underscore. So underscore rect is short for rectangle. I'd like a rectangle, please. And this is very simply, you can see there's 5 arguments here. So this is simply our x, where on the canvas we want our x and y to start, and how big we want, so the width and the height. So if we go back to the API function, you can see there, if we go to rectangle, there we go. So x, y, width, height, and then corner. Okay, so let's go back to the code window. So this 10 here is the it's a corner argument. So essentially what that does is that draws a rectangle, and then using this corner argument, you can set a rounded edge on the corner of that rectangle, hence the name corner, to appear bigger or less rounded. So if I was to put 0 in here, which we're going to do initially here, and then you'll see the effect of 0 will be a perfectly sharp 90-degree corner. If we increase that number, then it'll get more and more rounded by the radius of whatever that number is. So if you put you see I previously had a radius of 10 in there, that'll put a radius of 10 on each of the 4 corners of our rectangle. And then in the next line, we simply just say underscore fill. That means we want to fill that rectangle, and I've just used the term red. Now you can use the old hex codes in here, so I think further down in some other code you'll see an example of how I've used some custom colors, so you can use whatever color you want. Essentially I'm just using the basic red and blue you see in this other example here, but I'll show you how you can put the other color codes in there to actually fill them with whatever code you need. So we're simply going to just draw a rectangle that's red, and that's it for the moment in this drawback. Obviously your callback would probably be more complicated than that, and you'd have more things in there, but this is just for the demonstration of this instrument. At the moment this redraw callback is not doing anything, because you can see there's a function here that calls that redraw fallback that I've got currently commented out at the minute, and I'll explain how I'm going to show that and the importance of we talk about that in a minute. So let's save that and then press run and see how that represents itself on our canvas. So remember, our canvas is the full 640 wide by 360 high, so the full size of our instrument, and we've said we want our rectangle to be 110 in from the left and 145 down from the top, and then 100 by 100, hence why we've got this red rectangle. And you can see we've got a perfectly nice sharp rectangle there. If we change that back to 10, which was what I had in there originally, and save it and rerun now, you'll see that I'll have rounded corners, as I was trying to explain. There we go. So there you got the rounded corners, and you can go silly and put 25. So get a nice big. There you go. Until eventually. Seems a bit weird, but you can create a circle from a rectangle. Simply because now we've got a round of 50 there, so it shows it's only 100 by 100. It's actually drawn it as a square, even though it's called rectangle. But yes, you can draw squares or rectangles without. These don't have to be equal. The width and the height, they can not be equal. But if you keep an equal square and then you choose the half of that dimension there as your radius for the corners, then essentially it's a square box with radius, perfectly radius this corner with no flats on it, so you end up with a circle. So it's a bit weird. You wouldn't use it for that, but just to show you exactly how the code is operating there. So let's go back to our normal, and you can see if I alter the let's change that one, let's make it a bit longer in that direction. So they should have a long red box now, because we've made the width 300. So now we've got a 300 rectangle by 100 deep. So you can see how you can draw the shape on there. Now it's important to note that these X and Y's here relate to the X and Y for the canvas that you're drawing on. So if the canvas wasn't the full size of the instrument, which it is in this case, and the canvas was only sort of placed here initially, bearing in mind this is where you set where the canvas appears within your instrument in the add, then this X and Y would be 110 in from the left edge of the canvas, not from the instrument. So let's let me just show that for you now. Let's make that so what I've done there is I've moved now the canvas to 200 in from the edge of the instrument, and I've just reduced the width there to 440. So the canvas is now only going to be on this portion of the actual instrument screen, and you'll see how that rectangle box now draws over to the right hand side, because now it's 110 in from the left end of the canvas. So the canvas is probably, if we were to draw a line around the perimeter of the canvas box, would probably be down here somewhere and across there like that. So the 110 is now sort of about there, and then obviously this is another 200 where the canvas starts. But so we can't actually draw on this section now because this is just instrument, this isn't canvas. Okay, so let's change that. Whoops, that's not meant to be 640. I was in the wrong field there. There we go. So let's get our instrument back to where we had it, and that one. Okay, so we're back to our red rectangle again. So now what I'd like to show very quickly is just with that red rectangle now, I'm just going to show you the rotate very quickly. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this other code up just to help us see the rotate a little clearer. Is I've just got now another rectangle that I've drawn here, and you can see this rectangle is going to be 0, 0 by it's going to start at 0, 0, and it's going to be 640 by 360. So essentially it's going to fill the whole canvas, and we're going to make it yellow. So now, because that comes before the red, the yellow should appear first, and then the red rectangle will be drawn on top of that. Again, the Z order is maintained there. You add it at the top as it appears first on the canvas, and then any items that you add after that will appear on top of that. So let's run that. So there we go. There's our yellow canvas, or a canvas full of yellow, 640 by 360, and our red square there in the same location as it was before. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just use the rotate, and the reason I've put that yellow block on there is just because I want you to see where the bounds of the canvas are. So essentially now this is just a canvas. We've just got our big yellow paintbrush out, and we've painted the canvas plain yellow, and we've put a red square on there too. you can see the red square rotate when you choose rotate, but it's easier just to see how the canvas moves in relation to the instrument if I put this yellow box on there. All will become clear when we run the instrument, and you'll see. So what I've done here is I'm just going to rotate. Now this rotate works the same as the rotate that we've seen in previous videos. You give it the ID. This is why it's important to give the create the ID for the canvas. So I'll just give it the name canvas ID. You give it the ID in the beginning of the rotate function, and then you say how many degrees you want to rotate. So we're just going to say we want to rotate 30 degrees. Now it will rotate using the center of the canvas. So the center of the canvas is around about here where I've got my mouse pointer here. So it's going to rotate around there 30 degrees. So we should see, if we were to rotate around that point 30 degrees, this red box will probably go up here somewhere. 30 degrees is clockwise direction, positive. So if we run that now, there you go. See, now if I hadn't have shown the yellow, you would have just seen a rotated red box and might not have got the visualization of how that canvas has rotated now. But now we've got the yellow on there, you can see how the whole canvas, this white bit is the instrument, this yellow bit, because we drew it and covered our canvas, is the actual canvas. So that is our canvas that is rotated. So when you rotate the canvas, the whole canvas rotates, and all the objects that you drew on that canvas stay where you drew them in relation to the canvas. So the rectangle is still in the same location, the 110 and the 145, and it's 100 by 100. But because we've rotated the whole canvas, then the red square rotates with it. So just wanted you to see that. And then, so let's turn the rotate off. Whoops. Let's turn rotate off quickly there. And then, so you could have quite a lot of drawing functions in here, or drawing objects that you want to create, rectangles, circles, lines, all sorts of graphic objects. And that would be your draw callback from your initial add. Now, when I said back on the wiki page, we'll just go back there very quickly on the API page. There is the other function is canvas draw. So canvas draw works very similarly to the canvas add, except for you're not giving it the coordinates, because it obviously already knows where the canvas has been added. But you do need a callback, which we've got there, draw callback. And you give it the canvas ID that you've already created. So it's just another way of saying, yeah, okay, I'd like to redraw that canvas, please. So canvas draw, it's called. You give it the ID, and then you tell it a callback. So that's what we've got here, canvas draw. My ID is canvas ID that we created here, and this time I'm going to give it a function name of redraw callback. So I've created another function name here. So you can see now, if I did this redraw, I could make this the same function name. I could just call it draw callback, and that in fact, let's do that. So if I do that now, in fact, let's just get it back to how it was and comment that out for a minute, just so we're clear that it's gone back as it was. So there's our plain yellow canvas with a red square on it. And then if I do canvas draw, nothing's changed, because all that canvas draw is doing, it's redrawing. It's here in the add, it's done the draw callback here, it's painted the canvas yellow, and then it's put the red square on there. And then this canvas draw function says use that canvas ID and do draw callback. Well, draw callback is exactly the same thing, so it's just going to draw it again. So it's drawing it essentially twice there. But because there's no change in this function, because all of these parameters are static, then you see the same thing. If these were changing parameters, then you could move elements across the screen. If these were variables and you had different X and Y's in there, you could, use it to draw traffic going across a map page or whatever you wanted to use it for. So there's lots of options for changing this information if you wanted to redraw. But to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a different, you can do it this way too, you can call a different function. So I'm going to call this redraw callback. So now I've done my initial draw, and just to show you now that when I write this canvas draw, this redraw callback, what will happen? There you go. So what, as I just explained at the beginning, it did the initial draw of the yellow and the red, but then immediately afterwards we've said use that same canvas ID, so it's the same canvas, and do redraw callback. And redraw callback just happens to have a circle with a fill of blue, so it's drawn a circle for us and it's made it blue. Completely overwritten the yellow and the red. We'll never get the yellow and the red back unless we draw callback again in one of these canvas draws some further point on in the instrument. So you can see how with the canvas those elements are redrawn whenever you call that canvas draw. So if you want them to reappear, you either have to put them on a different canvas and leave them there, or you have to include this code within the redraw function. So you could, I suppose, call a function from a function. You could call, if you wanted those elements, you could call that draw callback function within this redraw callback. So when you did this redraw, it would do the draw callback, and then it would do the additional things within this redraw callback. Hopefully that's not too complicated. Okay, so what we're going to do now is if we we'll leave that as it is, and then we'll just talk about the circle very quickly, and then we'll go on and look at some of the other functions for the graphic elements drawing onto the canvas. But that's essentially the essentials of how you start a canvas and how you use the redraw of a canvas, and how you add elements onto the canvas. And we'll just be looking at some of those other elements now, just to give you the different shapes and the different graphics effects. So the circle very quickly then, let's just go back to the API page. The circle here gives a CX, CY and a radius. So it says there on the wiki page here, left point of the center of the circle, top point of the center of the circle. So again, coming in from the left, where do you want the center of the circle? Coming from the top of the canvas, where do you want the center of the circle? And then how big do you want the circle, the radius? Oops. So you can see there we're saying we want it 150 in from the left, 185 down from the top, and we want a radius of 50. So of course if we make that radius bigger, what will happen? We'll get a bigger circle. There you go, there's the bigger circle. So that is essentially the circle function, very straightforward. Now, if you you can see on these examples that I've shown for the rectangle and the circle, I've used this underscore fill here to give me a fill of the color. I may want to just show the outline of the particular item, in which case I use the stroke parameter. So let's go back and look at them. So there's the fill. You can see the function for fill then is literally fill and a color there. And there's an example of how you can use the RGB coding there with the hex numbers to give a color, or you can use that type of format for the colors. You don't have to necessarily write the words in. These are just for the everyday red, blue, green, yellow, etc. So really straightforward with the fill. You just give it a color, and then the stroke you also give it a color, and then you give it a stroke width. So that's basically the thickness of the line. So stroke will just give you a line depending on what that thickness is. So if you give that as you make that number bigger, the line will get thicker, and it will be in whatever color you specify. Again, within that color you can specify all the same colors that you can for the fill, but you just get a stroke. So we're going to have a look at some examples of fill and stroke using some of these other basic shapes just now. So let's have a look what we've got here then. We've got quite a lot of different things commented out here, but for the moment what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to my canvas ID again. So again, I've got the same canvas, but I want to call this function redraw2. This is my redraw2 function. So for the moment I had it commented out, so I'm going to uncomment it here. And now, even though our blue circle's there and we've not done anything with that, when I save that and I run again, we'll get whatever our new canvas draw function. As you can see, everything's commented out, so we just ended up with a blank canvas. So we're not getting the blue circle anymore, because although the canvas draw is calling redraw callback, we've used this canvas ID because we've got another one later on in the code, the canvas draw, and it's using the same canvas ID. This time it's calling function redraw2, which is this one here, redraw2. It's overwriting what we have there, just like I said before, so it wipes the canvas clean. So let's start then by having a little look at the move to and line to. So and there we go with the stroke as well. So what we've got here then, move to just sets up the start of the draw, the location for the start of the draw. So you use it with a few of the drawing functions, and this one particular one is going to be for a line. So the move to sets the start point of the line. So again, they're just x and y coordinates. So we're going to say we want to move to 10 and 10. So that's going to be up here somewhere. We're going to say we want 10 in from the left side and 10 from the bottom. Sorry, from the top. And then it says, can you draw a line? So from that point, now the cursor, if you like, or the drawing point is at the coordinates that the move to has set it to, and then we say we want a line to 70. So that's going to come across here somewhere, and 70. Oh, so that's going to come down there somewhere. So 70 and 70 is here, 10 and 10 is there. So it's going to draw us a diagonal line down here, across here somewhere. And then we're going to say that we want to draw it with a stroke, and then there's our RGB color code there. All zeros is a black line, so no red, no green, and no blue, and a stroke width of 3. So we want it a thickness of 3. The line, you'll see, I can play with that in a minute, and we can change the thickness of the line. Okay, so one thing just to talk about very quickly there is, there you go, you can get an example of what you can do. So you can see you can use multiple lines, as in the wiki example here. Then we're only drawing the one sort of diagonal line in the example there, but you can see here you can start with a move to at a certain location, and then you can draw a line to one location. You don't have to do another move to, because obviously now that drawing point is at the end of that line now, so you can carry on the draw from that point and do another line to another point. So you can see how you can just use lines to make shapes and draw different objects like polygons and whatnot, and join those lines up. Or if you join the line, if you get to the end here and you want to draw back to the original location, if those lines enclose a particular shape back to the original starting point, you can use a fill on that, and it will fill the inside of all those lines are drawn. So you can draw a shape that isn't a standard shape and then fill the inside of it with whatever color you want to make your objects, and you can use different ones of these to make up whatever image or graphic that you want to represent. So, whoops, sorry, go back. Okay, so now we've commented that, let's have a little look and see what that does. Now we've got our redraw function running there. We should hopefully get a black line. There we go, there's our black diagonal line starting at 10, 10 and coming down to 70, 70. And if I play around with the width of the stroke here, just I don't know what we're going to choose, 7. That should give us a nice thicker line than what we had before. There you go. So you can see, you can probably go back to a nice thin one. You can go back to say 1. An idea of what they look like. There you go, nice thin line. So that's just a very thin, sort of 1 pixel wide line there. And then the colours, as I said, in the RGB thing. So what colour do we want it? Let's choose green. So let's put FF in the green location, and then we should end up with a. Let's change that width a little bit as well. So back up to 5. So we should end up with a green line this time. There you go. Okay, so let's just change that back to black. And 3 maybe. So there's our move to and our line to. So the line to obviously is unique to just the drawing of the line, but the move to we'll use for a few of the different drawing effects where we need to start an initial position. So we want to move to a certain point. Now, of course, as I was saying before, if you want to draw a polygon, you can draw the various lines and then fill it, or just leave it as an outline if you want to use the stroke to draw that. And then if you wanted to draw a different shape somewhere else, you can then start, after you've done that initial thing, then you start off another lot of draws, but you can use the move to again to then move to another location on the canvas and then start drawing again whatever shape you wanted. So move to is just a way of moving without drawing. So you just move to a location on the canvas, and then obviously you can use a drawing function after that to then start drawing from that point to wherever the next point is. So in this particular case, it's a 70-70 from an initial 10-10. So 10-10, 70-70. So the next shape we're going to look at is triangle. So let's take these comments off here that we've got. This one that I've pre-prepared. So here on the triangle, what you're doing with the triangle, I suppose you could draw a triangle using lines if you really want to, but the actual triangle here makes it that much easier for you. And there's 3 lots of, you can see here in the little commented out example I've got at the top here, you give it 3 lots of X and Y. So if you think of a triangle, it's got the 3 points on there. You just need to say what the X and Y are of each of those 3 points, and it will generate a triangle for you. So what we can do is we can draw a filled triangle, and we can draw a triangle with a stroke, similar to how I was explaining before with the stroke. You will just get an outline of the triangle as if you've drawn it out of lines. So let's have a little look and see how that appears. So there you go. So in the first example, we're going to draw a triangle at these coordinates, so X and Y, X and Y, X and Y, for the 3 different lots of coordinates of the triangle, or the points of the triangle, and then we're going to do a fill red. Now, the other little thing as part of the fill location, you can see here we've got a 1 here, and you're wondering what that 1 is for. That allows you to do opacity directly with the fill on the canvas. So you can still apply opacity to the canvas as an overall, but if you want individual objects to have their opacity changed, you can see now if I change that to 0.5, what happens to that red. You can see there it's changed the opacity by half. Let's go back to the solid colour. And then in the next example, we draw another triangle again. This time we've just shifted it across to the right a little bit more. You can see these X's are a little bit bigger than in the previous example. And then rather than the simple red there, we're using the RGB type arrangement again, and again, because we're using all zeros, it's black, and we're saying we want a stroke of 2. So now you've got a thickness 2 line going all the way around there. You can, if you want to, obviously make that a lot thicker, and it will just follow that triangle shape but with a thickness of 10 all the way around. So that's triangle. So the next one we're going to look at is one we've already touched on already, so we're going to skip through this one fairly quickly, and that's rectangle. So again, I've got two rectangles for you here. I've got a filled rectangle. I've used a different color code in there just to show an example of that, and I've got a rectangle with a stroke applied to it, again with a black and a border of 2, but the same principle with the triangle. This time it's a rectangle. You know what the X and the Y and the width and the height do, and the 10 is obviously the size of the radius in on the corners again. So let's go ahead and run that. There you go. So all the 7s gives you a grey, and there's our black again. Same deal with that. You can make it bigger, and you get a fatter border all going all the way around, and you can of course change those radiuses to be whatever you want. There you go. Okay, so that's rectangle. Again, another one we've touched on when I showed the blue circle at the beginning, and that was circle. So we'll just show it again very quickly here with circle. So same deal, we're going to do a fill circle, and we're going to do a circle with a stroke. Again, we've used all the 7s, so that'll be a grey circle that we should see there. This time we've changed the colour code slightly, so that's red, green, blue. So we've made the blue full intensity there. So this should be a full blue, not a full blue circle because it's not a fill, it's a stroke, but it should have a blue border around our circle there with a thickness of 12, so it'll be quite thick, a blue sort of donut if you like. And so yeah, the circle, these are the center, so the center coordinates for X and Y of where you want the center of the circle to appear, and then this last argument is the radius, how big you want the circle to be. So let's have a look at the circle there. So there you go, there's our filled grey one and our blue donut that we have there. And then the last one I want to speak about in this video is ellipse. So with ellipse, whoops, let's just bring that up so we don't confuse that one. Okay, so with ellipse, it's almost the same as circle, but you can see, so we've got the CX and the CY, but this time we need to give it 2 radiuses, because obviously with an ellipse shape, you need to say how long you want the X and how you want the Y. So if you make these equal, you'll basically end up with a circle, but if you make them not equal, then you'll end up with an ellipse to whatever degree obviously you make the ratio between these two in terms of what the ellipse will look like. So let's have a little play with that and see how that turns out. Again, all the 7s, so that will give us a grey, and then a stroke, that looks like that's black, and a line of 2. So let's just see what that does for us. So there you go, there's the grey ellipse and the black line. So you can see here now, in this grey example, our X is less than our Y. So you can see there, for our radius, our X is only 20, but our Y is 30, whereas in the stroke example, this one here, we've made the X more than the Y, so the X is obviously stretched in that direction as opposed to the Y. Now obviously if I wanted to make that even less the Y, then I'd end up with more of a sort of very long elongated ellipse there. There you go. So you can see how you can manipulate those arguments to give you the shape that you need if you want to use ellipse for that particular you need to draw an object using the ellipse drawer. So I think that's where we'll stop this video. That kind of gives us a nice place to stop and conclude the initial canvas. In the next video we'll look at some more complex shape draws like arcs and an arc2 function and a quad. I'll explain what they are in the next video, but this is a good starting point for doing the basic shapes and how to set up and show the relationships of the canvases, and when you do those redraws, that the fact that they get cleared down and freshened off, and you draw back over the top of that with whatever new shapes you wanted. So I think that concludes this video, and we'll carry on with the canvas in another video soon. Please join me for that. Speak to you soon. Bye.